You remember how back in the day, if you were to come home late for a regularly scheduled TV show, your brother would already be watching and you'd ask him, hey, did I miss anything? He'd then tell you what you missed and you'd go on watching the TV show. You could ask me the same question here in this game. Hey Harstem, did I miss something in the first 10 minutes and 48 seconds? And I would have to answer, no, nothing happened. Both of these players decided that today was going to be the day where they went for an 11-minute no rush. They did not touch each other. They had some minor interactions, 100 resources lost on the side of the Terran and 100 resources lost on the side of the Protoss player. That is it. Nothing happened. And take a look at the armies that they've amassed. One dude has freaking 5 Immortals, 2 Colossus and the rest Stalkers. And our other player, Ares over here, has 5 tanks and infinite Cyclones. How about that, huh? A Mech versus Protoss game. It's one of the... it's a treat. It honestly is a treat for me because we don't see this a whole lot. But before we get into this, let's quickly look at the Imbalance complaint form, shall we? Dear Harstem, Terran is a totally IMBA race. At least, that's what I think. I'm sending you this replay looking for an answer on how to counter Terran mass mech. A composition of siege tanks, cyclones, Banshees,
Banshee reporting for duty,
Ravens and Vikings is unkillable for me. Then switching to Battlecruisers. How to counter this? Is there any possibility? Do you have to be much better than your opponent to win this? Or can you be at a similar skill level? Is Terran IMBA? Or do I suck? That's the question that was asked by Hangman, a European Protoss player at 3920 MMR, wanting to know the answer to the age-old question. Is it IMBA? Or do I suck? And with that out of the way, let's get back where we left off. I am not a huge fan of either of these armies. I don't understand why we have so many Hellions in the first place. That is a massive waste of supply in my opinion. But then again, I also don't quite understand why we are building Colossus if your opponent has 5 Ravens with interference matrix available. That is pretty crazy. That is like being a shapeshifter, seeing that your opponent, your enemy, your nemesis in this movie has a fishing rod, and then you turn yourself into a fish. It's like, brother, that is the one thing he can deal with the Raven, all right? That fishing rod is not going to be great if you're an elephant, so maybe turn into that instead. It's the same here. Although I still much prefer the Protoss army, just due to the fact that Hellions are completely useless. Cyclones are kind of useless unless they have serious tank backing as well. So with a swift A move, I do believe that Hangman should be capable of moving into a position here where, quite frankly, this is an unlosable game. Like, you A move this army down and we should be absolutely fine. At least that's what I would expect. Let's take a quick look here at the resources lost. It's about equal, but because we're up a base and we've been mining a little bit more, this should hopefully be okay for Hangman. Hangman, who by the way, is currently on +2 attack versus 2/2 upgrades. Now this is important to note, because it does mean he's a little bit behind in the upgrades. We have double armory here for Ares, and really just single forge for Hangman. Now, I always much prefer attack upgrades over armor upgrades if you're playing against Mech, but it's not bad necessarily to get those armor upgrades or to even get shields, especially if later on you have to deal with units that attack very quickly, like for example, Battlecruisers. Now, after this particular win, I would say we just cleared an entire army. Maybe we can deny a base or two. Maybe we can attack the orbital command. There are 0 tanks out. The current armies as they stand are 6 Cyclones, 2 Vikings, 9 Hellions versus 36 Stalkers, 6 Immortals and 2 Colossus. Now, I am not a StarCraft expert. No, I am a StarCraft expert. But even if I wasn't a StarCraft expert, I could see that this is a fight that Hangman should win 100% of the time. He could blink on top of these Cyclones, dance his army 3 times consecutively, and still win by blindly A-moving afterwards. I'm like 90% sure that if he just walks 18 of his Stalkers into this planetary and fights with the rest of this army, he still would have been capable of winning. Because there were 0 tanks, Now, there are 4 Banshees out, which are okay when it comes to damage output, but are not so great because they die pretty quickly against Stalkers. Banshees get a lot better if you get extremely high numbers, but if you only have 2 or 3, they're not actually that brilliant. A lot of air units actually have this because air units stack, so they can always attack. So they really nicely scale into longer games or into bigger numbers majority of the time. Now, what are the ship weapon upgrades that we have so far? We have +1 for these Banshee transition. We have +1 air weapons on the way as well over here for Hangman, who's adding in 2 Stargates. I would like you all to note, by the way, that Hangman, he basically waited for about, a minute and a half to use his advantage. He still has the exact same army that he had a minute and a half ago, and his opponent added, 5 tanks, 6 Vikings, and 5 Banshees during that time. And now was the time that he decided to attack. Also, this planetary got established during this period. It's just one of these things that, from a logical perspective, a common sense perspective here, would be good enough to understand that if you have a very big army left over after a fight, the best time to hit a counterattack is right away because your opponent is at its weakest at that point, right? And after a while, your opponent might actually be capable of getting decent counters against the army that you already have or that you still have remaining. This is, by the way, a really nice setup. A lot of tanks over here. I'm a big fan of that. The moment you see Stalker Immortal and you can just mass out 10, 12, 13 tanks, I think that is phenomenal for Terran. I really think that's quite cool. And you can send your Cyclones in front of it as well. I'm not a huge fan of the position here. This is really odd. Usually you want something in front of your tanks. And also you want all of your tanks to kind of be together. You don't actually want to form a massive siege line all the way back. If you have all 9 tanks fighting, that's great. For whatever reason, these 5 tanks aren't actually in there. Fleet beacon on the way, more Stalkers coming in. Hangman hasn't expanded in a little while, by the way, and hasn't managed to deny any of his opponent's bases. Now it's going to blinking forward, takes out a couple of tanks. Banshees are actually dealing a surprising amount of damage. This is a really cool engagement, and I kind of want to show it again because of that, all right? So before the fight, if we think about what wants to shoot what, tanks are over here on the bottom side. Now, Immortals are great against tanks. Banshees are a flying unit. Stalkers are the only unit that shoots up. So, in my mind, Immortals go to the tanks, Stalkers go to the Banshees. Now, let's take another look here at what our good friend Hangman decides to do. Revolutionary, but not very good. Like some revolutionaries just aren't very good. That happens. Blinks into tank fire. Immortals, meanwhile, are busy shooting Hellions and Cyclones. And the Banshees plus Vikings manage to scan the Observer and then the Banshee's cloak. And it actually ends up being a pretty even trade, surprisingly so. I think this should have been an absolute win here. A big fat W for Hangman. Hangman, who's struggling dealing with this depot. The natural predator of the 6th base of the Protoss is a depot on top of it. Nothing he can do about it. This army obviously isn't close enough to clear that depot right now. It's much better to just stay in this position. Let the probe handle it. He's a professional after all, knows a lot about buildings. If you want to safely deconstruct the depot, would you get an army? They only know aggression. Or would you get a probe, a building specialist, an architect himself? Ooh, this is a rough fight, or could be a rough fight. Actually, this is probably a fight you can just take as well, isn't it? You could just A-move on top of this. Another thing, by the way, if as a Protoss player, you see a higher tank count than before, it means that you can't be kited anymore. Then adding in things like Zealots or Archons is actually very useful. Archons tank a lot, have pretty decent damage output as well. We also have 3 Observers, which is a good call. I would probably even get a couple more, or I might add in an Oracle, so I have more consistent detection for those Banshees. Behind all of this, Ares is building... has 8 starports. 7 of them have tech labs, and 1 of them has a reactor. So that means a potential switch into Battlecruiser could happen relatively quickly, and we actually are seeing our first Battlecruiser starting right now. Get a move command here, or a right click on top of a tank. Loses a couple of Stalkers. It's continuing with Immortal Zealot. The funny thing about this is, by the way, well, funny, the sad thing about this is that Ares is defending one section of the map. This is one of the hardest things to do as a mech player, is to effectively split your army And as a result, IODIS is not splitting his army whatsoever. That is his solution to the very difficult problem. Now, that leaves all of the other bases extremely vulnerable. They're not defended. Base trades are always won by the non-meching player, because Mech is very bad at moving quickly. So you can just base trade at any point and have a great time. What Hangman is doing right now is he's allowing his opponent to push him back with a single, pretty much a parade push through the middle of the map, while at the same time also transitioning into battlecruisers. I didn't even know this was really possible. Battlecruisers are famously difficult to get into because they're so supply heavy. So if you build them 1 or 2 at a time, you might be capable of making the transition, but getting to very high battlecruiser numbers is very difficult. If you transition with 7 battlecruisers at the same time, that means that your effective supply left over on the map is too low to really withstand, you know, the force of a regular sized army. Right now we have 6 tanks, 3 Hellbats and 4 Cyclones, 4 Banshees. That's all the damage there is over here. Once again, at any point, you could just A-move into this and win the game. I'm not sure about the blink forward, allowing the tanks to shoot at their preferred armor type. Not a huge fan of it, but yeah, this is pretty much what Hangman should have been doing for the past 4 minutes, 3 minutes, or just going around and killing bases. Right now, IODIS still stalling for time, running by with Banshees, running by with Hellbat Cyclone. The moment you see a Terran throw away his entire army to kill a Nexus or to clear 2 pylons, you should probably be a little bit suspicious as to what is actually going on. And maybe it would be wise to try and scout their infrastructure as well, which is something that Hangman hasn't done in a very long time, or whatever army they're rebuilding, which is also something that Hangman hasn't done in a very long time. Now the battlecruiser count is up to 8, and I could say, well, Hangman, you have now lost officially, because battlecruisers, they're one of these units, you know? If you let them get to it, they're actually really good. But then I would be lying. Battlecruisers are okay if you get to them. They're not brilliant, they're not that good, they're fine. Battlecruisers are still relatively slow, they're not great in base trades, and on top of that, they actually have a hard counter. The hard counter to the battlecruiser is Tempest plus Mothership. There is really nothing that Terran can do against high Tempest counts with Oracles and Mothership. There's just nothing they can do, you're getting outguided. But even with Mass Stalker, if you just decide to never fight the battlecruiser, you can often have a fairly decent game. And look at what Hangman has been doing. He decided so far to not fight the army, he cleared 2 bases, he's denying a lot of mining of his opponent, who's only on 45 workers remaining. Like, this is exactly what he should have been doing for the entirety of the game, and now accidentally did. As long as you just run away from your opponent's army, they can't take a good fight. They just can't. It is not possible, because you're faster. And that is how you should be using the Stalker. I didn't even mention this yet, but the Stalker is not actually a good unit against Mech. Well, it's a good unit against Mech, but it's not a good fighting unit against Mech. The Stalker is very powerful against Mech because it allows you to run away from the tanks. It forces your opponent to split up. Because if your opponent has 4 tanks over here, 5 tanks over here, and 4 tanks over here, if there's only 4 tanks here with 42 Stalkers, you can just blink in and kill all the tanks. Now, if a Terran puts 20 tanks over here, you can just go kill bases and you never engage with the army. You just get a higher gateway count, and then eventually you can overpower them when the Terran decides they really need to move out because they have no bank remaining and they're at 120 supply. Like, this is the exact opposite of what you want to be doing with Stalkers. You don't want to be blinking into battles. You want to be blinking on top of planetaries and bases and clearing them at a very high speed. Then with the bank that you have, if you lose something or you trade 3 Stalkers to a battlecruiser, you want to rebuild those Stalkers. But you don't want to be waiting until your opponent is on your side of the map, starts killing your buildings, and then blink into him. If, however, your plan was to straight up fight with Stalkers against battlecruisers, it might be wise to add in a Guardian Shield as well, or Sentry for a Guardian Shield, basically providing you with 2 free armor on top of your Stalkers. But Hangman isn't really doing that either, is he? He still has 6 Immortals, whom serve almost no purpose over here. I guess they are clearing the Vikings and the helmets on the ground, but I much would prefer just having a bigger stalker count. I'm not even sure if he's target firing on top of Battlecruisers. Like, I think he's actually just A-moving because the damage seems to be somewhat split. Mainly among the ground units. It's not even the BCs that are actually taking the damage. And now he goes into Void Rays. Also one of these weird units to build in this particular scenario, because the Void Ray is not good against the Battlecruiser. The Void Ray is forced to attack into a Battlecruiser if he wants to fight. And Battlecruisers, when they're all fighting at the same time, are freaking powerful. On top of that, Yamato pretty much one-shots the Void Ray. It doesn't entirely one-shot the Void Ray, but you shoot a Yamato, then you attack it for 2.5 seconds, and that Void Ray is gone. Void Rays are also very high in supply. You'd much rather just have Tempest. They have longer range, they deal bonus damage to Battlecruisers as well. Is an absolute no-brainer. But once again, the most ideal thing would be to not fight. Kill this base. No defense. Send one Zealot over here. This base can't land. Blink on top of this. Also will go down instantly. Like, there is no reason ever to blink into this. Not one. The funny thing on top of all of that is that Hangman also doesn't even engage in one go, but he keeps engaging, losing 5 units to Yamato, then waiting 50 seconds until Yamato is back off cooldown, then goes in again, loses another 10 units for free against Yamato, rinse and repeat, and he just keeps on losing more and more units. Despite all of that, resources lost is still only 5k in favor of the Terran. So if you just actively expand behind all of this, you still have a decent chance, but that is the problem, is that Ares hasn't really been actively expanding. He's now once again trying to take the 7th base, but he's being very slow at it. More Battlecruisers are on the way. Earlier there was a Raven in here, by the way, which is really cool because Ares realized that the Battlecruiser is a high attack speed unit, which means that anti-armor stuff or plus armor is very powerful against it or with it. If you have anti-armor on your opponent's units, the BC is going to go absolutely berserk. If you have a Guardian Shield providing extra armor, or there are shield upgrades, which by the way are not even here for Hangman, then the BC also loses a lot of its value. So we have fully upgraded BCs against not fully upgraded Stalkers, without the benefit of having a Guardian Shield as well. Okay, here we go. Void Rays do charge up, and if Void Rays actually get to deal some damage, they're not that bad, but as you can see, they just practically instantly die. Hangman loses his Void Rays, becomes afraid, he's like, oh no, he's used all of his Yamatos. Probably a good time for me to retreat again. Although this time I guess there's not a whole lot for him to retreat to, as Ares actually continues attacking over here. And pretty much just eats him. Although, it's not even really eating, you know? It's like a 3-4k difference over here within that fight, which, yeah, is crazy, but at the same time, you're fighting with Stalkers against Battlecruisers. This is one of these things that Protoss players always accuse Terrans of doing. It's like, oh, Terrans can just build bio and they can win every fight. And here, my man was building the freaking Cybernetic Score unit, not fully upgraded, against a 3-3 late game beast. Yeah, you're supposed to lose those battles, my friend. That is completely fine. There's like 3-4 points in this game where you made some insane errors. Okay, we can go over all of them. Actually, there's like 5 or 6. First of all, your unit composition against heavy tank probably shouldn't consist of so many Stalkers. However, because you're playing against Mech, you can make a lot of mistakes. So even if your army completely consists of pure Stalkers, as long as you're just base trading with it or killing bases and not straight up fighting into your opponent's army, it is going to be fine. Third, if you win a fight against a Mech player, your goal should be to take out a base or to do something with that lead that you've just created. Majority of the time you can just straight up win the game and kill them. You probably could have done that, but in this case I'd be fine if you just killed 1 or 2 of his bases, but you didn't do that. Fourth, if your opponent is transitioning into Battlecruisers, building 8 BCs at a time, and you give your opponent the time to get 12, 13 BCs out without realizing that he's transitioning, then there's no game sense. And this feels unfair because game sense is something that just needs to be learned through experience, but it just shouldn't be possible. If you see 4 tanks and 5 cyclones and you're maxed out, you should realize that something is missing. It's like, hey, where's the rest of this guy's supply? He's been on 5 bases the entire time. You didn't realize that either. Like, there's so many things in this game where if you just would have swapped one little thing, you would have won extremely easy because Mech is absolutely non-viable at the highest level, or really it shouldn't be viable at any level versus Protoss. Protoss is extremely good against Mech. And the final thing is that the Battlecruiser actually has a counter, and the counter is to go Tempest plus Oracle. You use Revelation on the Battlecruisers, you shoot the Battlecruisers with the Tempest, and then I hear you say, what if he jumps forward and uses Yamato? If he jumps on top of your Tempest, you use your mothership to recall the Tempest away to a different location. They just used their jump, they can't run away anymore, and you've won the game. So, is Mech imbalanced? No. Did you suck? Yes. That's just the way it is. I'm sorry. All right, it's going to be it for me today. Thanks all so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this episode of Is It IMBA or Do I Suck? And if you did, don't forget to like button, subscribe to the channel. See all of you next time for a new one. Bye-bye.